Howdy, howdy. Welcome to another episode of FloridaMan40k. I'm here with Daniel.
What's up, everyone? How's it going?
And we are here to talk about the new Psychic Awakening, as well as talk about our preview for the SoCal Open. We've both got a little bit of new lists in reference to the Iron Hands FAQ, and we're kind of excited to see where the meta is going to take us.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I've been building and painting a bunch of new models, so it's going to be fun. Hopefully I have some good news from my little practice RTT this weekend, and hopefully we have some great news from SoCal.
Yep. And before we dive too deep into the Space Marine meta, because that's where we're living now, we're going to go with the other faction that everyone is already sick of this edition, Eldar. So let's honestly just dive right into it. Psychic Awakening came out. I feel like it was kind of overshadowed and no one was really talking about it. But there's a lot of quality gems in there, and at first, I think people thought it just wasn't going to hold up to the new Space Marines, but I think when you take out the Iron Hands, or the power level that they were before, I honestly think that Eldar is going to do really well here. I've heard some people say that this is Eldar kind of getting options to replace rules, rather than just getting new ones, like what Space Marine got. That's true, but Eldar started off so much ahead of where Space Marines were 2 months ago. Where, yeah, they're not going up by as much, but you take one of the most powerful armies in the game, you give it more options, a couple of them end up being pretty strong, they're in a good place.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of like a balance. You don't want to make Eldar even more powerful because they have been pretty dominant off and on this season, but giving them more options and more ways to customize for the meta will just keep them relevant, and that's what I like about this release, and hopefully we get this for other armies as well, is when you have more customization and more options, you get not necessarily an increase in power, but you just have more chances based on what other armies are doing well. That's actually why I think Tau is a cool army, because of all their signature systems. They can customize, like if you have a lot of flyers, a lot of stuff with fly, you get velocity trackers. If not, you can take extra armor penetration, or you can take some other buff, just depending on what your meta is like. So getting more options like that across the entire game just kind of feels good.
Yeah. I'm actually super happy about this Eldar release. You're going to hear me hate on Eldar a lot because it's fun, and I hate Eldar and Tau, even though I played them for a little bit last season. But I think that they did a really good job. It's a power buff. It's not a crazy buff. I think it takes them to slightly below Space Marines, but honestly, we didn't need to just take the next army and put them even higher than Space Marines were at. That wouldn't have been good for the game. Mm-hmm. But hopefully this is a sign for the rest of the Psychic Awakening books, and whichever factions are next, they will receive a similar buff where they just get more options, go up a little bit in power, without eclipsing, the new Space Marine meta, but still they can compete with it, which is really what you want.
Yeah.
All right.
The one thing I'm worried about is Chaos already has so many interesting psychic options. I'm hoping that it's more buffs to the army and not so much just focus on the psychic part of Chaos, because that bookkeeping does get kind of tedious. And I'm saying that as a Chaos player.
Yeah. Let
alone someone who has to play against it.
To be fair, they're calling it the Psychic Awakening. I don't think that it is intended just to be psychic focused. We'll talk about Dark Eldar in here. Dark Eldar did not get any psychic-focused buffs because they don't have any psychers. And we know, based on some previews that they've put out, that Sisters of Battle and Black Templars will be heavily involved in the next stage of this campaign. So, we'll see. Both of those armies need new rules. I'm sure they're about to get them, but both are traditionally non-psychic. I imagine they'll stay that way.
Yeah. But one last speculation before we dive in, is coming back to armies like Necrons and Tau, who have basically never had any interaction in the Psychic phase. I'm hoping that they either get a relic, a warlord trait, or a stratagem where they can at least try to deny just one key power. Like, they don't have to be dominant and do all this crazy stuff, but if you've been around the warp long enough, I feel like you should have some minor ability to interact with it a little bit. So that's one little hope I have, is maybe we get a 4+ deny, or a warlord can deny like a psyker once per game or something. I think Necrons have that, but
Necrons have the Gloom Prism on the Tomb Spider.
That's what it is.
If you've never seen that before, there's a reason. Go look it up and then decide it's not worth taking.
Exactly. So without further ado, let's dive in.
Alright, so first things first, this is kind of getting into the Blood of the Phoenix box set. We do have rules for the new Plastic Howling Banshees and Jane Czar. We're not going to hit every single aspect of this book because there are many places where you can listen to someone reading the book and they actually have the book in front of them. We just have a PDF. So, just quick thoughts. I like both of these units. To be clear, the main strength is the no Overwatch, I think. And the +3 to charge if they advance and the ability to advance and charge. Mm-hmm. However, both Jane Czar and Howling Banshees feel like they don't hit hard enough. Howling Banshees have decent weight of attacks, but low strength 3, AP 3, damage 1, no rerolls to wound. Just doesn't feel like it can go through it. Jane Czar is the exact opposite problem. She's strength 5, she has base reroll to wound, D3 damage, but has only 4 attacks. And she's 115. A Banshee squad minimum is 65 for 5 girls. Just either way, it feels like you're not getting the right type of close combat in there. But they can advance and charge, movement 8 +3 to charge on a turn when they advance in Overwatch. They really feel like there'll be a small unit in there to support a larger melee push. Whether that ends up being Grotesques, Talos, Shining Spears, kind of hard to predict, but you need to have a dedicated melee unit that in itself is susceptible to Overwatch for them to be worth it, in my opinion.
Now that you mention it, I do really like the idea of using them in tandem with Grotesques, not unlike some White Scar builds, where you have that big, just kind of nasty unit that wants to get in there, so you have your supporting units that makes it, like, safe.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going into a Talist and you had 2 units of 5 Howling Banshees, they have a 3-up armor save. They could be out of line of sight and survive the random smart missiles long enough to get 1 or 2 girls to go make a long move and charge, tag as many things as they could. You could get some play out of it. I don't think by any means it's terrible. I think that you could make it work. It also feels like as long as the Banshee Mascot Arc on bike is an option, which, yeah, you index as long as that's around, to me it just feels like they aren't the best at their role. And I think that that's the role that they're going to be best at.
Yeah. But you do get kind of the flip side of if you saturate without over-dedicating points, you can get 2 or 3 of these units and the Autarch on bike and kind of have a couple, 3 or 4 options, and that way your opponent has to really wrap and screen their entire army instead of just focusing on wherever the one threatening flank is. You can threaten pretty much anywhere, and they have to really focus on screening, and if they don't screen well, you can exploit it. But at the same time, they're, T3 one-wound models that if you have Thunderfire cannons or smart missile systems...
don't say that.
Exactly.
Oh, that'll hurt. Yeah, that'll hurt real bad. The other point I think is that they are cheaper than an Autarch. An Autarch is well over 100 on a bike, and Eldar usually struggle, or craft rollout, they usually struggle with filling HQ slots, and that they want to take too many HQs because you're often taking a flyer wing, so then you don't have as many HQ slots as like an Imperial battalion list, and you're already filling it with a Warlock, a Farseer, etc. It can be hard to fit an extra HQ in at that point, so maybe some people will find use for it. I think that you would probably need a Wave Serpent to really justify it, but overall, I don't see them making a splash on the meta. What I do see making a splash on the meta is the Eldar successor traits. I'm not going to talk about every single one, just the ones that I happen to like the most. They have an equivalent of Master Artisans. Master Artisans has been in pretty much every Space Marine successor chapter that has been doing well. I really expect to see it do well here as well. Other than that, they have Master of Concealment, which is essentially stealthy, again, from Space Marines, which is one of their best tactics. Same thing, you're in cover if you're over 12 inches away. Both of those two, and then I would probably say the... what is it? There's one that ignores cover, I think.
That's what I was just looking at. The Masterful Shots, if I'm understanding right, you get army-wide ignores cover.
Yep, everyone.
Which, with Night Spinners, do Night Spinners already ignore cover?
Night Spinners do not ignore cover. That would probably be the best place to put it, honestly.
That was my first thought. I couldn't remember if they did, but if you can have ignore line of sight, obviously if you're ignoring line of sight, 9 times out of 10, your enemy's getting cover. So if you strip the cover and Like, it just makes them so much more efficient, and as we've seen from Ruben, Night Spinners can do a lot of work.
Yeah, we'll give a quick shout out. Ruben Fernandez was on my ATC team this year, the Florida Man, and he ran 3 Night Spinners, and he actually got a lot of great effect out of them, but since you can pick 2 traits from this list, similar to Successor Chapter, I think taking in cover 12 inches away, it's probably not quite as good as a Light Talk, but still provides a bit of a durability buff. That and either not Master Artisans or ignore cover would be very strong. Same thing, Crimson Hunter Exarchs. Yeah, because we need more flyers. You could absolutely take the 12 inches away cover, and then take the Master Artisan's ability would probably be better on them since they already have such high AP on their weapons. Again, that would make them very, very potent. Were there any other ones that stood out to you at all, Daniel?
So Strike and Fade is kind of cool, because it does not allow you to take a second attribute, so this is it. But what it gives you is you can charge even if you fell back, and when you're not within 3 inches of any enemy units... Hold on, sorry, let me read this again. Yeah, if it's not within 3 inches of any enemy units, and it consolidates, so after you've destroyed a unit... if I'm reading that right.
Yeah.
Then you do not have to end your move closer to the nearest enemy model. So you run up, you charge, you kill a unit, and then you can fall back into cover, or you can jump to an objective. You can't get pulled across the table in melee. You get the freedom, if you kill a unit, to just go somewhere.
That is actually pretty cool. So, I would say that you'd probably see that more in like a small detachment. I don't think that would be an army-wide. Like, you're not going to make an entire craft world based on Strike and Fade. It's interesting that one is one that you can't stack with. I would think that doesn't seem much more powerful than some of the other ones, but I can see a good player with a very precise list making some really good work with it, actually. Fallback and Charge is incredibly valuable. White Scars, Kraken Tyranids, you see it in competitive builds all the time, especially ones that I like to play. So that is actually interesting. I hadn't looked at that one as much. I kind of dismissed it out of hand, but it's actually not bad.
Well, and one thing I like too is units that have fly. You can go in and tri-point, and then you can fall back over that screen and charge into something more important. That's where, so there's a 1-2 here, because since it's not something you have to, like, I guess Kraken it applies, but almost everything in Tyranids does not fly.
Yeah.
Infantry-wise.
Yeah.
But, so you can find some good infantry with the fly keyword, and I think really get a lot of mileage out of this attribute. Like, I haven't played enough Eldar in 8th edition to really know all the ins and outs, but just from playing other armies, Chaos especially, where I do have some infantry units with fly and some tricks I can pull, that just seems like a really good one for cracking into a castle, which we're seeing more and more castles.
Shining Spears seems like the best use of that, because they can fall back, shoot, and they get their cool benefit on the charge. So if you were to go a spear heavy build, I could see you taking an attachment of that.
Absolutely. And going back into the second part of that, spears are very good at blowing up a unit they charge. So being able to harass your opponents if they're near terrain, where you can go crash something. If they're near terrain, you hop into that terrain. Now you get cover. There's a lot of manipulation you can do.
Yeah, I think the 2 other ones that I would say I like from that is that there's one where shuriken weapons get an extra AP within 12 inches. So I'm thinking Guardian Bombs. And then Webway Warriors, this is going back to Guardian Bombs, is basically that you can use the whatever it's called, the Webway Strike stratagem. You can use that you can use that twice per battle. So basically you can spend 2 command points to deep strike 2 units, or I believe you can spend 4 command points to deep strike 3 at that point by using one of it as the 3 command point deep strike 2. At that point, you could deep strike 3 Guardian Bombs, and all of them will be the extra AP 1 within 12 inches. That becomes very, very powerful firepower. I could see that having a little bit of play. Again, to me, that feels like a detachment, not an army. Army-wide, I would say the Masters of Concealment, the Master Artisans equivalent, whatever they called that, and then the Ignore Cover. Those seem like the ones that I would make an entire army out of. All the other ones feel like a very specialized attachment to me.
Yeah. But I do feel like, kind of with the Inari characters too, where you do get into souping a little bit more, I feel like there is that similar type of play where you can just pick one detachment to do something very well and then complement it with a different detachment that does a completely different role, has different attributes. You can get where it's the same army, but each detachment feels like a completely different army.
Yeah, and that kind of feels like Tyranids to me, where Tyranids, if you've ever seen a Tyranid list, it's been a while. You pretty much never take all of one Hive Fleet if you're doing pure Tyranids. Yeah. You almost always mix up various Tyranid Hive Fleets, which is fine, but that's what this feels like to me. Mm-hmm. Overall, I would actually say that I like most of these better than a Live Talk. It's worth noting that these are not successor chapters and that they don't pick a craft world to hail from. So it's not like you can make 2 of these and then say, oh, I'm a Sam Hand successor, I get to use the Sam Hand stratagem. No, you are a new craft world. You don't get any of the relics, warlord traits, or stratagems from that craft world. Fortunately, almost all of those suck. So if you are comparing this to a Live Talk, you lose a very niche stratagem that never really gets used anyway. It's the one where rangers get hit on 6s if they're in terrain instead of just taking your natural -2 to hit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be used, but it's not a big loss to drop that. So I kind of like this better than a Live Talk just because it gives you a lot more offensive output. And in a Marine world, I feel like that's what you need.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was about to say is 2 months ago, I would disagree. But with Chapter Master existing, it completely... It makes Alteok and similar just not nearly as relevant. Like, it's still frustrating. -2 to hit Plague Bearers with a 4-up invul is still tough, even with Chapter Master. But it's not enough to keep you alive the entire game anymore. And that's, I think, good for the game, because sometimes those modifiers to hit, like, you just can't interact with your army or with your opponent's army, and that's just not fun. So I do like that they're... I don't want to say getting rid of, because they're not. Like, you can still absolutely do that stuff, but they're rewarding players for moving away from that hyper defensive negatives to hit plus invul blah blah blah, and they're rewarding a little more offensive firepower. So it's a balance, it's a fine line, but I like the direction they're going as long as they don't go Iron Hand stupid again.
Hopefully they've spoiler alert, Imperial Fist and Salamanders are coming. Oh boy. But yeah, no, I agree in general. I like the offensive shift, and I think this is consistent with what they have been doing so far. So I'm more than happy to see that. Let's bump on down to Dark Eldar now, since this one's going to be a little more complex. Yep. I'm sorry, let's actually go back to the Exarch powers.
Okay, yeah.
We need to not skip those.
If I do play some form of Eldar, it's going to be Dark Eldar.
Oh, I love Dark Eldar.
I mean, it'll have 3 Crimson Hunter Exarchs, but it'll be Dark Eldar.
All Dark Eldar lists have that. They just happen to have 3 Crimson Hunter Exarchs. So, the new Exarch powers, yes, every single aspect type did get a boost because of this, but the ones that were more powerful before are still more powerful because they all got boosts.
Yep.
Fire Dragons are still really not worth taking, in my opinion. Dire Avengers, cute. There's one that I like where if you lose a model, then the unit becomes +1 to hit and +1 to wound. But again, you're looking at a 12-inch range unit, and they're only T3, 1 wound each. If someone wanted them dead, they would die. So I see this as just being a Necron problem, where players will very quickly learn, okay, don't just, put a Stormbolter into a random Dire Avenger unit. If I'm going to shoot it, just kill it. And that's not hard enough to do to really justify. Mm-hmm. Dark Reaper's got some interesting options. My favorite, personally, would be Reign of Death, where you take a Dark Reaper Exarch, and when it shoots the Tempest Launcher, the super annoying 2d6 shot mortar, and you can reroll the number of dice for how many attacks it makes. I like that a lot. That's probably my favorite, but you can also add 6 inches to the range, which again makes that Tempest Launcher 42 inches instead of 36. Very, very annoying, very hard to get away from.
And one thing I like about that one, too, is it applies to all ranged weapons of models in the unit.
Yeah. The 48 inches felt like it was always in range anyway, but 54, just to make sure.
Yeah, and I mean, I go back to Tau a lot, I realize. But Tau have Daleth, which gives basically that army-wide buff of increased range.
I thought that was Borkan.
It is Borkan, sorry. Daleth
is cover and terrible.
And well, unless you're playing the Big Tuna.
Yeah,
so terrible. Anyways, sorry, Borkan. And all the Tau players are going to give me crap now. Anyways,
They're not people anyway.
Things like when the Riptide heavy burst cannon is 42-inch threat, or some of those other weapons, you're so used to their range band, adding that extra range, you're not really thinking about it, and you can get caught in really bad positions just because you weren't, like, you're so trained to a certain range band, and just that little bump can put your opponent into a really bad position because they just forgot. And so you're not always going to get like the top tier players that way, but the more decisions you make your opponent make, the more chance there is that they make a mistake.
Yeah, absolutely. So I like Dark Reapers again. I would say you probably are going an MSU at this point. I know some people used to take the big 10-man squad. Sometimes you take the little 3-mans with the Exarch with Reaper Launcher. I like the little 3-mans right now. You can still take one big unit to fire and fade back and forth, but with the Marine Thunderfire cannons being relatively prominent right now, I don't think I like that as much as just a small unit that's more annoying to shoot. And also, you could take a Thunderfire cannon into that unit and cover, and you would probably come out with the Exarch wounded but alive, and then they have to shoot a whole nother indirect fire round into it. But a big squad will attract too much attention, in my opinion, and be too juicy of a target. I don't like that as much for the price.
Yeah, for me, I like the idea of bringing 3 units, 1 big unit, 2 small units, because there's so many matchups where it will still do well, but you are absolutely right. Like, that big 10-man unit becomes a liability, and you've got to be very careful playing into a smart Marine player that they're not just going to use it against you.
And let's be honest, if you're building a list right now, you're building it for Marines.
Yeah.
Okay. So, next up, I'm going to skip over... Howling Banshees, because I think they're just still bad, unfortunately. Again, they've got some cool stuff. I just don't think any of it's meta shaking. Swooping Hawks are actually super useful. Flying Screens are still very, very valid. Again, I'd say my favorite is Suppressing Fire. As long as the Exarch's alive, if you fire Overwatch, you become -2 to charge. As a deep strike screen, that is incredibly potent, great against Chaos, and great against Orcs.
One I kind of like is Fast Shot. I'd have to look at their guns again, but Assault 6.
I want to say it's normally Assault 4. Okay. The thing is that I want to say they're Strength 3 AP Dash. It's a lot of dice, which with Doom and Jinx can become very cool. But to me, their value is in a very fast flying screen that's relatively inexpensive. And dumping out the little shots like that means they can clear infantry out. But you can also, it should be noted that you can change your Exarch power between games, similar to Psychic Powers, Chaplain, stuff like that. So while I'm calling out ones that I think are useful, maybe I end up playing against Tau and I decide, you know what? I really don't need to be -2 to charge. And then you can take something like that, just put out a couple extra shots.
Yeah, or that Swooping Barrage, you get you add 1 to rolls for your Grenade Pack ability.
So that would make them mortal wound on 5s, as I recall. So a 5-man squad goes up, comes back down. You roll 5 dice, 5 ups. That's a solid 2 mortal wounds on unit of your choice. But
I like that it
3 of those.
It gives you a very increased chance of just hitting a nice variance.
Yeah,
and suddenly, I'd equate it kind of like just a smite, where you might do 1 mortal wound, you might do 3. Sometimes you fail. And sometimes you might get 6. Granted, if it's 5-man squad, you're not getting 6, but having that opportunity, little things built into where you can have the variance just make it worth it, I kind of like. And mortal wounds are one that you really feel the variance when it's positive, and you don't really care that much when it's negative. You're not expecting it, but it can just give you that extra boost.
Yeah, no, I like that. Actually, I think I like that one a lot. That and the -2 to charge both are pretty good. Finally, I think we're just going to hit Shining Spears again, because, hey, they're still good. What is it? There's one of them where you can give the Exarch +1 to their saving throw. Or I'm sorry, they get a 3-up invulnerable against ranged weapons, where normally they get a 4-up. If you stack that with Protect, that would give you a 2-up invuln. And the Exarch for Shining Spears, I believe, is actually a 3-wound model. That would actually be very useful for tanking, because if you just had like a 9-man squad of Shining Spears, and the front guy has a 2-up invuln, you could still be a Lighthawk at this point. So you can get you can get your -1 to hit at that point. You can Lightning Fast Reflex, you can Protect, you can Conceal. you can make that unit very, very difficult to kill. And if they get some good shots through, you have a 2-up invuln in front to tank. That one probably stands out to me the most.
Yeah, I like that. There's a lot of good ones for the Shining Spears, honestly. You can get just +1 to your charge roll outright with all the other stacking abilities. Like, that just feels good.
You could actually get a really reliable deep strike with that. You could even do 2 squads. You could do one has the +1 invuln starts on the board. One has the +1 to charge and ends up deep striking. Bill Tan has a stratagem for +2 to charge for Aspect Warriors. I think it's +3 if you're near the Avatar of Cain, so let's just call it +2. But that makes it, for just a stratagem, that's a 6-inch charge out of reserve. As a Genestealer Cult player, I would kill for that for 1 command point.
Yeah. And aren't there other buffs, or do those not apply to Craft World?
There are. There is a there's a secondary Craft World that's +1 to charge rolls. That's a 5-inch charge off Deep Strike. Again, with no failure points in there, as long as you have a command point to spare. That's actually really, really useful. There's a lot of play in here, guys. Like, I'm not going to claim that we're discovering all of the knowledge in this book. There's absolutely stuff that we're going to miss here that we're not going to see all of the additives to. But really, I think that this just diversifies the Eldar lists, because let's be honest here, Eldar have gotten powerful but a little stale.
Yeah.
Once Ynnari got Ynnari'd, there has not been a ton of variety in Craft World Eldar builds. So it's kind of nice to see this. I could absolutely see multiple... I could see two spear units coming back, honest to goodness.
Here's another one I like. Withdraw. At the end of the fight phase, if this unit contains a Shining Spear Exarch and is within 1 inch of any enemy models, that unit can make a fallback move of up to 6 inches as if it were your movement phase. So you can fall back, which allows you to move and advance in your next movement phase instead of only moving.
Yeah. So I think where this would probably be most useful is in your opponent's fight phase.
Exactly.
Where if they charge you, because you have a 2 command point fallback and charge, but 2 command points.
Yeah.
I could see some matchups, like a Chaos matchup where a 2-up invuln against shooting is not as useful. +1 to charge doesn't matter because you can probably just deploy and just go at them that way.
Yep.
But getting tied up by Plague Bearers is bad.
Well, and it lets you hop over the first screen, so then you can advance over a second screen if you need to.
And charge again if you've got Samhain strat. Yeah.
So it can just get you to a point where you can really go after some characters. Again, like the other one we were talking about, just any ability that gets you extra movement, gets you out of combat, you can just really set up to steal objectives, go get characters. More movement is always good.
Yeah. I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent here. I don't think that this is an optimal choice, but I think that good players will know when to use it. And I think that's actually one of the hallmarks of the good players is when they take these secondary choices that are not often seen and people are kind of ignored. Because, for example, if you're, let's say, a bandwagon Eldar player, you just take your Farseer and you do Doom and Guide every time. And that's it. And you never think about the other ones. A more experienced player who's actually studied the army might know that there are games where you don't need Doom or you don't need Guide or you don't need one of these standard powers and actually knows the options well enough to decide, nope, this one time I'm going to take X random power or this maybe less popular Exarch trait, and it will actually come up in some games.
And that's, to continue on your tangent, when I was playing Chaos heavily, I would never notate my psychic powers on my army list because it forced me to always read through again and just make sure, I need to make this adjustment based on the opponent I'm playing. Sometimes Death Hex is the best power in my book, and sometimes I don't need Death Hex at all. Like, that's a very obvious one. But there's different matchups where you're going to have things changing, and it's, again, obvious in the Psychic phase with Psychic powers. Thousand Suns have 18 powers to choose from. So there's going to be a lot of variance there. You need to apply that mindset when you're given options like these tables. You have 6 options per different aspect host or aspect warriors, whatever. You have each aspect has 6 different options. So suddenly in any given list, you could have 24 options to choose from in any given game. So being aware of those options and knowing sometimes you need to change it around is pretty good.
Yeah. I said last one before, we forgot about Crimson and Exarch somehow. These probably got the biggest buff in my opinion, which is good because they were already one of the best Eldar units. So if you have 3, well, good for you. I mean, everyone does. But if not, get 3 before chapter approved and enjoy them while you can. They have some really good ones. One of them, +1 damage against fly. Obviously that's massive. And it should be noted that this replaces the existing Exarch powers, so in this case you'd be replacing the reroll ones to hit.
But you have the stratagem to retain that on one of your 3.
Yeah, you have a stratagem to retain that on one of the 3, or you could fly an Autarch nearby on a jet bike to kind of retain that. Or you can just have the one free reroll to hit if you happen to take the Master Artisan's equivalent.
Yeah.
So you can ignore the heavy penalty. Obviously that's great because it's a Ballistic Skill 2 platform with heavy weapons, so that's why it normally hits on 3s. It's not Ballistic Skill 3, it's Ballistic Skill 2 with heavy. So if you take that, suddenly you don't reroll 1s, but you hit on 2s. That's statistically just better.
Mm-hmm.
But then you put an Autarch in, or you have the one free reroll, and you're getting very accurate hits at that point. And again, a free reroll the wound in there as well. Awesome. +1 damage against fly is great in the Space Marine meta. Repulsors, that hurts them a lot, especially with no Ironstone. As soon as the Impulsor kit gets released, that will become a big deal. Tau, good for late game, but you might be dead by then. Yeah. So I don't think that that's as valuable there. I think I'd rather ignore heavy at that point. But plenty of good options. I don't think this is as powerful, but it's just annoying. When this model moves, you can pivot 180 degrees instead of 90. That's insane.
You're not going to crash and burn it. It can just go wherever it wants to on the table.
Yeah, because you either do 180 degrees to the left or 180 degrees to the right. That gives you a full 360. You can pivot wherever you want.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you can literally just go a third of the way up the table. Come honestly, back, go up. That's my personal favorite.
There are a lot of against chaos. You don't need +1 damage. You don't need ignoring heavy is cool, but that's an insane character sniper as well because you can with the speed on those things, you can literally go anywhere.
It forces the chaos player to have to tightly wrap each character, which means you're not moving fast. And when chaos can't get board control, they're done.
Yeah,
that right there beats chaos.
That's really good there. That beats Gene Circle too, because I live on crash and burn, getting out of their flight vectors, just hiding. It's impossible because they move 60 inches,
20 to 60 is standard for flyers. It's
Eldar, so they might be faster. It's probably 20 to 70 just to make sure.
Yeah,
that's insane. That's actually incredibly powerful. I like that a lot.
And wow, because of Thunderfire cannons hiding in corners. Yeah. What this can do is you can fly into that corner, pivot 180, and get back out.
Yeah, that lets you go, because I've absolutely left bait like that before.
Yeah, where you can, a 90-degree turn doesn't matter if either 90 takes you off the table. Yeah. This lets you pivot and stay on the table as long as your wings don't go off. You still have to be careful of that, but you can get into a much better position to snipe Thunderfire cannons, which are one of the most popular units in the game right now.
And to be fair, there is the case where they can rotate 90 after they move. So they already kind of had that ability to go hit a quarter, rotate, and then rotate again, then fly out. The big thing is that this lets you adapt to your opponent a lot faster.
Yep.
Because if my opponent went into a corner like that, rotated 90 degrees one way, I would throw myself as hard as possible in the other direction, knowing that I'm taking less shots. Because that was how I survived Eldar. This gives you a lot of options to react quickly. So if you're a player that maybe isn't as good at planning ahead, this will be very useful for you. Or if you're playing against someone who can redeploy very quickly, this is really strong.
And the other one I just want to mention, it's not as important, but you can just also ignore cover if you want to with eliminators and Firesight Marksman, things like that. It's useful. It's good to have. Because you can take something from a 1-up save and cover to suddenly having a 6-up save. That's a pretty big difference.
That is pretty good, yeah.
So sometimes you just need to move things, so it's not a bad option.
Yeah. And finally for Craft World Eldar, we're going to go real quick through their new psychic powers. So these are really interesting. These are what they're called lesser powers, minor powers. These replace Smite. And that means a couple things. It means that one psychic can only know one power from this tree.
Mm-hmm.
But replacing Smite, some units don't need that, especially Warlocks. Warlocks have Destructor, which is a special rule that makes their Smites 1 mortal wound and 9-inch range. Basically, it makes their Smites terrible and you never use it anyway. You could just replace it with one of these powers. Like, why wouldn't you? Ones of these that are the best, they're all very low warp charge, which is interesting. I don't think any of them are higher than 6. Some of them are as low as 4. One of them gives you +2 to charge.
Sorry, one thing to cut off.
Yeah.
Warp charge value of 4, and you have the ability to make all of your 1s count as 2s. You can auto-pass most of these powers if you take like a Supreme Command detachment of Psychers.
That's a very good point. Yeah, you
auto-pass.
You could auto-pass some of these.
And you can have +1 to cast, and that makes you auto-pass Warp Charge 5.
Yeah, it also means... Ooh, that is strong. Okay.
So keep that in mind as we go through this. They might be minor buffs, but having the guarantee of them going off unless your opponent can deny. Mm-hmm. And do they want to deny a minor buff like these? So it's just throwing that out there right now. Back to you.
No, that's a really good point that I'd missed. So, again, none of these are as good as the normal Eldar powers, but, it's free. There's a 3d6 target enemy character. Every 5+ is 1 mortal wound. Again, are you doing more than 1 mortal wound a turn? No, but every once in a while, kind of as we mentioned, you get that variance in there. You get 2 5-ups, and then, maybe the Rangers can kill that Space Marine Smash Captain, because then you'll need to do 3 wounds to him. That adds up, and again, that's more useful than a Smite in many games, because the Smite's so bad.
For me personally, one of my favorite psychic powers from Chaos is the same one that's Warp Charge value 5, and it's each 4-up is a mortal wound. Mm-hmm. So this is slightly worse, but again, you can't fail if you're in the proper detachment, and it's not uncommon to roll 2 5-ups. It doesn't happen all the time, and there's going to be times where you don't roll any, but if you can... basically, let me just get 1 or 2 mortal wounds on a character, that can be the difference of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. So, very nice to have in there. And again, it replaces Smite. You're not giving up its normal roll. Because normally, you have a Warlock, he's there to cast Protect or Quicken. And that's great. He never smites, he only casts 1 power. You can just throw this power in there. And, you know what, maybe Arm in Perils at some point. Maybe you have like an exposed character who's been shot by snipers a couple times. And you're like, you know what? It's turn 4, everything's engaged. I don't need to quicken this turn. Let me just drop a mortal wound on this guy. Boom, he's dead. Done. That's a big deal.
That's exactly what I use that type of power for. Is it's a great finisher, and it's the threat of it is enough to force your opponent to plan. Mm-hmm. You might never cast it, but knowing if with a little bit of luck, my character might just take 3 mortal wounds and it dies. It can just it all comes down to make your opponent make as many decisions as possible.
See when he messes up.
If they mess something up,
yeah,
you again might never cast this power, and it can completely mess with your opponent.
Yeah. Fateful Divergence, very nice. You target 1 friendly unit within 6 inches. They can reroll a hit wound save. Awesome. Mm-hmm. It's a hit roll or save roll.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you get 1 reroll between all of that or 1 of each. I think you get one total. Still, you know what? If it's an auto-passing psychic power, as we've described, not bad. If you've just got a guy who doesn't have anything else to do, maybe you take that on all of them. If they don't have good characters to snipe, and just whenever a guy doesn't need to cast a power, just give a Crimson Exarch a free reroll the wound. Why not?
And that's one of my favorite things with Strength 9 weaponry. You have 3-4 shots.
You only need to reroll 1 anyway.
You almost always have that one that misses, and you're just like, really?
Yeah. There's one that adds 2 to the damage of a melee weapon. I think that one's not great because pretty much every Eldar Psyker that can take this is like a 2-attack guy with a sword or a witchblade or whatever that's AP dash, and it's already damage D3. I don't rate that one highly at all, but...
It looks cool until you look at what units can take it.
Yeah, it looks like one of the best. Man, if I could take that on like a Space Wolf Librarian, oh buddy, sign me up. And that's...
Damage 5 Thunder Hammers.
Yeah, that's just not a good... Eldar power.
Yeah.
Ghost Walk I mentioned. You pick a craft roll unit, get +2 to charge. Hey, remember that +4 to charge spear unit we mentioned? Let's make it +6 to charge. Eat a dick, Change Store Cult. Utility on that is obvious. You pick a unit, make it charge more likely. Failing charges loses games sometimes if you can make it reliable. And this one's Warp Charge 6. But again, that's not hard to pass. Warp Charge 6, you can get a +1 to cast. That's not a hard power to pass.
Especially when you're 1s or 2s.
Especially when you're 1s or 2s. that would...
There's a very specific roll that you fail, and that's on double 2s. Or I guess double 1s that turn into 2s.
Yeah, that's that's very good. Focus will. You can add 2 to deny the witch. You know what? Not bad. Again, against chaos. Would I take that? 100% yes.
Because sometimes that one death hex can cost you the game if your Shining Spear
and
suddenly don't
there is actually a Farseer power that gives you +1 to deny, as well as an Aura of Fearless. But if you were to stack those 2, very easy powers to cast, you could have one guy who denies at +3 and can reroll failed denies because of his Runes of the Farseer. That is suddenly shutting down reliable powers.
Warp time, death hex, even stopping a smite that you need to stop. And +3, suddenly you're competing with some of these, like the bigger smites that get +2, +3, like orcs getting +3 to cast with the boys around them. They might roll the big smite, you could turn it off. Like, that's a thing that you can still do.
Yeah. No, that's very good. I think these are all wins. And then, finally, there is one more that I haven't actually read up until exactly this second.
Yeah.
Oh, this one. I have read this one before. This one's a weird one. You target an enemy unit, and it can only target the closest... So the enemy unit that you debuff, that enemy unit can only target the closest enemy unit unless it is shooting something within 18 inches of it. The trick here is that this power is ranged 18 inches.
And you have to be visible to the Psyker.
Yeah. So what you could do is you could use this to make sure that your opponent's not targeting something important far away. So, for example, let's say they've got a repulsor, and this is a turn where you're popping out your fire prisms. You maybe pop out 3 fire prisms, shoot 1 repulsor to death, you cast this on a second repulsor. That repulsor is going to annihilate that poor warlock so hard, but it cannot shoot at the fire prisms downfield.
Yep.
Something like the Tuna, Riptide, Knights, you kind of have to accept that you're losing a unit that's within 18 inches.
Well, and the thing that
you can make trades.
The thing it does that I like is you can literally just throw this guy to his death.
Yeah, he's screwed.
And if he's the only thing within 18 inches, like, something is going to kill it. It doesn't have to be the target you debuffed, but then the next closest unit outside of 18 has to be what the debuff shoots at.
Targeted.
Well, yeah.
No, because it has to shoot the guy within 18.
Well, but after you kill the guy within 18, nothing else is within 18. Now you're dictating what they shoot. So, like, your repulsor is either going to shoot my character to get rid of him, or you can kill that character with a Thunderfire Cannon, and then your repulsor is only shooting the next closest thing.
What if you picked a Crusader, and that Crusader, and like the rest of the army is like Gallants and stuff without gun? Like, this is a weird power. I think it's hard to use, and I don't think it's going to come up often. But if you're on heavy terrain, especially, what if you put a ranger squad out of line of sight in front of it, and then the character was the closest visible? Well, you can't shoot the character because there's a ranger squad in the building. But then you can't shoot anything past 18 inches because he's there.
Yep.
Then...
Yeah, that's a very good point. It's
hard to use.
Incredibly hard to use, but it's kind of...
Again, though, this replaces Smite. You're not giving up your normal powers. Like, if you just take a Farseer and say, yeah, I'm going to take my normal suite of powers, my Doom, my Guide, and we're just going to drop Smite, and we're going to take this instead.
You know what this reminds me of is the Forbidden Gem, in that a lot of games, it won't matter at all.
Yeah.
But occasionally, there's going to be that one threat that you shut down for one turn, and it wins you the game. That's what it reminds me of.
No, I get you.
So I actually really like that. As clunky and hard as it will be to use, it can just shut your opponent down.
Here's a question. These can be taken by Craftworld Psyker models. Models can know instead of one of the Psychics from the Rune of Fortune. Okay. So this is Runes of Fortune. Okay.
Yeah.
So... you could take that on a Hemlock instead of Smite.
Yeah.
If you flew a Hemlock up and said, hi, you can only shoot the closest thing within 18, well, then you're a Hemlock, and then you use Lightning Fast Reflexes, you're -2 to hit, and that's the only thing they can shoot at.
Yeah. And if you can still stack that with Alteok, because it's 18 inches.
Yeah. They could probably step inside it, but some things, again, like a Repulsor that wants to move 5 inches... that has some play. I still hate Hemlocks because I think they're trash. but
it has some play. And again, it will dictate not just what that unit is shooting at, but where they can move now.
Yeah, and that also makes them move up.
Yep.
And you know what? Maybe you've got the Incarn behind a building. You want them... Oh, okay.
There's enough play.
Sean Naden's going to win a game with this power.
Yes.
You're not going to see a lot of people really get the full benefit of this, but we're going to see Sean Naden win a game at LVO in the top 8 on stream because he pulls some bullshit with that power.
That is exactly what that power says to me.
Yeah. Okay. I think that wraps up Craft World. I think we rambled a little bit on that one, but Dark Eldar is a little bit shorter because they don't have any autarchs or aspect warriors, and they don't have any psychic powers.
Yeah.
So let's dive right in. First things first, Incubi. Pretty good melee unit, but 16 points per model for a T3, 3-up save, 1 wound. It's hard for me to love that. I don't think they do enough damage. But Drazar.
Hold on. I gotta say.
Okay.
One of my favorite models, and one of the reasons why I love Dark Eldar as much as I hate Eldar in general, is the Incubi.
I love the Incubi models.
They
the new plastic
are
looks so cool.
One of the best models in the game, and they've just gotten better.
Yes, they look amazing, and I would encourage everyone to own some anyway because they look awesome. But in melee, I think you can give them, what is it? Yeah, you can get +2 damage on a 6 to wound, but it's an unmodified 6 to wound, so again, you could variance hammer through this, but since you don't have Doom anymore, it's not as reliable. You can give them +1 to wound with Drazar, but it's unmodified, so it's, again, not as good. But a full unit of 10, if you charge into a knight at 3 attacks each, with the Clivax that's 31 attacks, you can get some pretty good dice through there. And it's AP3, so every 6 to wound is relatively likely to stick at that point. You can get some good damage, so you could totally slag a vehicle with this. It's just a question of delivery, because you kind of want to be in Venoms, because Raiders are generally not great. But then you only have a 5-man squad, and if you only have a 5-man squad, you're looking at 16 attacks. Are you getting enough 6s through consistently? And yeah, you can actually get that up to 18 attacks, because the Clivex can take the dual blades on his Demiclaves, and then he gets 2 extra swings. Then it's only AP2, still strength 3 at that point. It's got some useful stuff.
I feel like, how many points do we say a unit of 5
16 per model, so that's 80 points for unit of 5. That's a little... it's cool. Again, I could see someone making it work, but it's a little bit too much. 14 points a model, and I'd really be looking at this, but it's just a little steep.
What I like is they are a wonderful anti-infantry unit. AP2 to AP3 is one of the best ways to kill guard equivalents, orcs, fire warriors.
A 5-man squad will clean up a 10-man guard squad without even blinking.
Yeah.
They're gone. They're dead.
And you can even throw them into a unit of orcs, and 18 attacks, that accurate, that much AP. You're not going to wipe, obviously, a whole squad of 30, but you're also 80 points instead of 230. So a couple of these units could do a lot of work into orcs and similar.
Yeah.
So I don't hate it. I just, again, if they were 65, 70 points for a unit of 5, I'd be a lot.
Yeah. And you can get cool buffs on them. So the 2 notable is that Drazar gives a +1 to wound aura, and there's a 1 command point for +1 to hit. So you can make them hit on 2s, strength 4, +1 to wound. It'll get somewhere. It's good. You can kill Marines with that.
Yeah.
You can kill Marines pretty dead with that.
Yeah, they're actually really good at killing...
Primaris. Every 6 is going to be 3 wounds. That's pretty much a dead guy if you fail the 6-up save. I like them. I don't love them.
Yeah.
I could see them in some list. I just don't think that you need to buy them if you don't have them already. But Drazar is my favorite part of this book. Oh my god, I love Drazar. So,
well, his model is just great.
His model's great. And we are actually fluffy here as well as competitive on occasion. Oh, that's sexy. So let's talk about just generic Dark Eldar problems. Dark Eldar HQ choices are generally expensive and redundant, and often hit like a wet noodle.
Yeah.
The Archon is traditionally 90-something points. And you don't need to, because all your guys are in transports. Flayed Skull gives you reroll 1s if you're in a transport. What is the Archon there for? He runs around like an idiot with a 2-up invuln. until you roll a 1 on the first save, which is the only thing that happens.
Mm-hmm.
You can buy him a blaster, but that's an index option, so you maybe don't count on that. And even then, you're paying 90, close to 100 points for one blaster shot. Like, I just...
Yeah, and the curse of the 1 die rolls, whether it's an invul save or a blaster shot, it's going to fail.
Or the damage roll, it's always a 1. It's just, I never see it actually do what it's supposed to.
There's so many rolls, especially for a single blaster. You got to hit, you got to wound, you got to roll the damage. Like, there's so many rolls where a 1 or a 2 just makes it not work.
Yeah. And taking 2 Archons always feels like a waste of points. 1 is a good Warlord trait caddy, a good Relic caddy. 2 is a waste of points.
Yep. But
Drazar, and all Incubi units, can go into any of the 3 sub-factions for Dark Eldar without violating the rules. Kind of like, Scions for Guard. You can take him in a Cabal of the Black Heart detachment without losing the trait, or any of the successors that we'll talk about later. Drazar is a boss. So Drazar is 4 attacks each. Doesn't sound too impressive, but again, if he uses the dual blades, he gets 2 attacks, so he goes up to 6 attacks. That's user strength 4, AP 2, damage 2 flat instead of damage 1 from the Incubi. He gets his own +1 to wound aura and is at strength 4. But again, if he uses the single blade version, he goes up to strength 5. So at strength 5, he's wounding toughness 8 on 4s. He's wounding Space Marines on 2s. AP 3, damage 2. All pretty good. He's 7-inch move. He's not slow, but he's not super fast. If you charge with him, he can be chosen to fight with twice. So now they have the opportunity to interrupt in between, but he's not fragile. T4, 6 wounds, 2 up armor save. He has a 5 up roll. You're right, I see it there. And power from pain, he's going to have a 6 up feel no pain. He's not going to die randomly. Like, he's tough enough. Now, I'm not saying that he's going to take a Blood Angel smash cap into the face and survive. But your opponent's not going to just get a couple lucky swings in with his Catachan unit and kill him. That's not going to happen. So if you charge him in, he's making either 8 or 12 attacks depending on the profile you use. I think that's very good.
Yeah, absolutely. It's when Syl-esque was first kind of spoiled and we saw the high volume of attacks you could get, and then you realize it's kind of hard to deliver, and there were some issues with Syl-esque's point cost. Drazar, I feel like, is very similar.
Yeah,
for
he's
less.
He's similar for less. He definitely does less, but he costs less. Yeah. And he fills an HQ slot, which Dark Eldar desperately need.
Where Chaos is spoiled for options in that HQ slot, Dark Eldar's not. So Syl-esque and Chaos feels very unnecessary because Demon Princes have fly. They're just going to do a little bit more throughout the course of the game. Drazar, for less, fills a very important role, and you're getting something out of it, and something quite good, actually. Yeah, instead of you're paying 30 points more than that second Archon that's going to shoot 1 blaster.
Yeah. No, it's
twice per game.
Every time. He does get the same lethal precision. A 6 to wound is +2 damage. So that takes his big version up to damage. It takes both versions up to damage 4 on a 6 to wound. At that point, he's contending with Knights, Centurions. He's not going to solo a Knight, but if I shot a Knight up with blasters and haywire and got it down to a reasonable wounds, like 8 or less, I would throw Drazar in.
Mm-hmm. You might just get lucky with that +1 to wound.
And even then, he wounds on 4s.
Yeah.
And what's interesting with the dual blades of the Demiclaves, I'm going to call this out. So when the bearer fights with dual blades, it can make 2 additional attacks with this weapon. Drazar's 4 attacks. If you take those 4 attacks and make 3 with the... never mind. Ignore me. It is not 2 weapons. It is 1 weapon with 2 profiles, and you can only use 1 profile at a time.
Yep.
So I was trying to be cute. No, but it's 1 weapon.
When you fight twice, though, you can...
Yeah, when you fight twice, you can do a different one.
So where this would matter is in a Death Watch unit. Mm-hmm. Your first swing, you can do the AP3 to try to get them...
through the Terminator or something?
Through the Terminator. It forces them to make decisions in a mixed unit like that.
Yeah.
Or if you charged...
Multiple units, you killed one and went to the next.
Exactly.
Yeah, because I could totally see with the dual blades, he could kill a 5-man Primera squad or a Scout squad relatively easily. It wouldn't take a stretch. Then he piles into the next thing, keeps dropping.
Yeah, it gives you the flexibility of having options in a multi-charge.
So basically, buy Drazar. Incubi are cool, but you don't need them. But if you want to take them, it's not making the list worse.
Yeah.
You could use them. Ready to rock and roll into the traits?
Let's keep rolling.
All right, so the traits are split up into 3 spots because, they've got Cabal, Witch Cult, and Homunculus Covens. Personally, I think that Homunculus Covens are the big winner here. Cabal seem like the worst. Witch Cult are cool, but maybe don't benefit as much as Covens, but they've got some good options. Cabals, a lot of these are kind of weird. Like, if you fall back from a unit, you can roll 1 dice, and on a 6, they take a mortal wound. Like, very situationally, 1 out of 6 chance, 1 mortal wound. Like, maybe if you're talking on a 4-up, D3 mortal wounds, maybe I take that. But in, like, giving up Vect for that, I don't know. If your opponent fails a leadership check, add 1 to leadership of your models. Again, you're normally taking 5-man Cabalite squads who, with Power from Pain, will become fearless at a certain point anyway. Again, morale is so rarely a problem for Cabal units. Because you're never taking the big 20-man squads, and even then, +1 leadership isn't really doing that much. So on a wound roll, alright, poison weapons on a wound roll of 6, add 1 to damage characteristic.
That's cool for Venom spam, I guess.
You say that, but when you go through the options later on, you'll see Venom spam gets so much better than that.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah, what I do like is adding 3 to the move of models that fly. That makes Venom spam very good. It's kind of half of the Flayed Skull trait. I just think that at that point you're better off taking Flayed Skull because I don't think any of the other ones are so good that it's really worth taking. The Webway Raiders, you can use the Webway Portal stratagem. Yeah. You know what? Yeah, no. I'm sorry. You're never going to Deep Strike Dark Eldar infantry units that don't already have Deep Strike that are specifically Cabal. I don't see it.
Yeah, so...
I don't think you're going to take a successor for a secondary Cabal pretty much ever, unfortunately. I just don't see that as a realistic choice. Sorry, guys. Witches got a couple of more interesting things. So, a couple things. When targeting a monster vehicle, which has 10 wounds or more, add 1 to the wound roll. This can become interesting. You can use it on Venoms, because Venoms can be a witch cult. That actually becomes kind of cool. Witches that are strength 4 with the combat drug, +1 to wound, are going to wound like a rhino on 4s. Again, I'm not sure if that's the best thing, because sometimes you're going to play against Jinx for a cult where it's just all infantry, and you're like, well, I gave up my trait for nothing. But it's cool. Like, I can see it being useful. It's already better than Cabal.
So Acrobatic Display I kind of like. When you're engaged with an enemy unit, you get +1 to your invulnerable save. Now, you can't take any other obsession with this. Mm-hmm. It's by itself. So that's the one. You can't take 2 of that? Yeah. Okay. But we'd have to look into it, but getting +1 invulnerable is always good.
Yeah. No, that... I don't know if that solves the problem with Witch Cult, which is always delivery, but... it does accent their strength, so it's not useless. I could see the argument for that over the normal Witch Cult stuff, absolutely.
Yep. And again, this is me going in with less knowledge of this codex than a lot of the others. Mm-hmm. So I'm going purely on the text, not so much what it can be used on, because I just don't know as well as you would.
Other than that, what? You can get 6s to hit, count as 2 hits in melee. It's cool. You can get an extra AP on a wound roll of a 6. Again, that's cool since witches don't generally have much AP in melee since you never end up buying their specialist weapons because they're a little pricey. They've got some cool stuff. You can make someone's morale 2d6 take the lowest. Cool. I just don't think, again, that that's going to be the best use of witch cults. It's a little bit better. Hyperstim Backlash. I think that's the one where you get 2... combat drugs instead of 1. No, it's the one where you take your combat drug result and double it.
Okay.
It makes it cost 1 command point instead of 2. That's useful. You can take the +1 strength, double it to +2 strength for 1 command point. And there might be a mortal wound function included as well. Mm-hmm. I never see that stratagem being used. I don't think this changes that.
Okay.
It's cute. It's not terrible. It's better than Cabal, but again, it's not anything to write home about. Mm-hmm. And then Covens. Oh, buddy. Coven's got the good stuff here. I'm going to say right now. Covens are my favorite Dark Eldar. They're what I played when I played Eldar. It was Covens and Harlequins and Eldar. Covens are so cool.
We just went over the whole Ironstone thing. And the first thing I see is Army-wide Ironstone.
Yeah, it's Army-wide Ironstone. Something to consider here. All of these are very strong, but Covens also had the previous best trait, is why they were good in the first place. Prophets of Flesh gives you a 4-up invuln, access to their only named character, who's boss, and also their best warlord trait, which is just a flat plus D3 command points. If you are trading that for this, you are giving up a lot. Yeah. So I don't want to make it sound like this is free. So when it sounds like this is overpowering, consider that you are giving up the best aspect of Covens to get this, which is the 4-up invuln, which is what made them so annoying. They don't get that for free, it's just that no one takes anything else.
And, their name character...
Urian Rakarth.
Urian. Is he the one that gives them the bonus toughness?
He gives them all homunculus give a bonus toughness. Urian Rakarth also gives them a +1 strength.
Okay.
And leadership.
And
so that doesn't make a difference.
Yeah. Strength on the grotesques especially.
Takes them from 5 to 6. That is a big deal.
Yeah.
But you can still make the units toughness 6 or Talos toughness 7. So I'm going to say here is that I think that grotesques are not the winners here.
Right.
If you take them from a 4-up invuln to a 5-up invuln, that's too much of a drop in the face of Marine Weight of Fire. Because reducing damage by 1, I just don't think that's it. It's cool. I don't think you're going to take grotesques as anything other than Prophets of Flesh, because also grotesques love having the Vexator Mask, which again is the Prophets of Flesh relic, because Prophets got all the good stuff.
Okay, and that was my follow-up question, was the fight last?
That is specific to them. So you are giving up the best part of Coven existing.
You can't do the grotesque build with this.
I don't think so.
But
let's go into the traits, because some of these are really, really good.
Yeah.
So the first one, reduce damage by 1, obvious benefits. And again, this is all Coven units. This could be Venoms that are -1, Raiders that are -1, Talos that are -1 damage. This can be very powerful. I like Talos with -1 damage a lot, but it should be noted that this is there. If you take this, you can't take any more. So this counts as 2.
Yeah.
Other one, you can do a mortal wound if you finish a charge move. It's not as good as the other ones. This one is cool, Dark Technomancers. This is one where you buff your ranged weapons. So you can basically overcharge a weapon, where if you roll a 1 to hit, you take a 1 mortal wound. You can't take more than 1 from this. But you add 1 to the wound roll, add 1 to the damage roll. This is insane. So think about this on Talos. You take their normal gun is strength 4, AP 1, damage 1, 2d3 shots. This is the Haywire Blaster. Haywire, so it does mortal wounds on a 4+, a 6 is d3. +1 damage, you're now strength 4 -1.
The mortal wounds are only against vehicle keyword, right?
Against vehicles, that's should be noted.
Yeah, that's a big difference.
So,
continue.
At this point, +1 to wound and +1 damage. If you're shooting this at Primaris and Marines, you go from wounding on 4's damage 1 to wounding on 3's damage 2. Huge difference. Same thing with Centurions. Any of the big tough units that are emerging, double damage and +1 to wound is insanely good.
Absolutely.
When you're shooting vehicles, that +1 to wound becomes bananas.
Because a mortal wound on each 3-up with D3 on 5
5-ups.
And it's 2d6 shots per Talos?
2d3.
2d3.
But you're doing a mortal wound per hit at that point. And the ability to spike, as we mentioned before, is much higher.
Absolutely.
No, you're not taking Talos in small numbers is the big thing. Is that if you're taking Talos, you're taking 6 at least, I think. But if you're talking 12 D3 shots with +1 to wound and +1 damage, and they take the normal save in addition to damage, you can very quickly chunk a vehicle down super fast through the Ironstone, whatever it may be. You can get really good shooting out of Talos with this. Also Venoms. You make all the Venom guns damage 2, make them +1 to wound. You're wounding Marines on 3, killing them on failed saves, even if they're Primaris.
Yeah.
Shooting at vehicles, they wound vehicles on 5s now. And are damage 2. Each failed save suddenly matters, where Venoms weren't threatening vehicles, and they're not soloing them here. But you can still do some good damage. Like that. This is probably the best part, in my opinion. I love the -1 damage, but I think that this is better combined with the next one. Experimental Creations. Add 1 to the strength characteristic of all models with this. Cool. And when you're resolving an attack with a poisoned weapon, not a shooting attack, not a melee attack, an attack, you can add 1 to the wound roll if you're targeting something with a lower toughness than the attacking model. What's interesting is that Homunculus, who gives the +1 toughness, he gives it to everything. He doesn't give it to infantry, monsters, he gives it to everything. So if you're taking a Venom, it's toughness 5, fragile, we know what it is. Suddenly it's toughness 6. There's a lot of heavy bolters out there right now. Toughness 6 is a big deal. Thunderfire Cannon, strength 5. Toughness 6 is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And now your toughness 6, you wound +1 to wound against toughness 5 and below things instead of toughness 4 and below things. If you combine those two, it's only for poison weapons, but you could get +2 to wound. You could take the poison weapons on a Venom, and you're +2 to wound against toughness 5 and below. You know how Venoms were kind of trash when they shot at guardsmen because they only wounded on 4s and they got a save? Well, suddenly they're wounding on 2s. This really changes the math on how much damage Venoms can put out.
Absolutely. And one thing I like about it, like you mentioned, is losing the +1 strength because you can't take Urian kind of sucks. This mitigates that. So you're still not getting the invulnerable save, but you can get into adding that strength back, keeping your toughness buff.
Yeah. And Talos actually have an armor save, so losing the invuln isn't... It's still a big deal, but it's not as crippling, whereas a Grotesque just loses one on their save all the time. The Talos can take a 3-up armor save sometimes. You can be in cover.
Yep.
You know, it's not impossible to get that model behind a ruin. It really changes the math of the damage output of Covens, and it changes what units are good. I think Venom spam is going to be crazy with this. Yeah. I think this is the new Venom spam. Flayed Skull was good, and you don't get the squads inside shooting with... Well, you know what? Let's point this out. The Dark Eldar transports are not locked. You know how like an Ultramarines Rhino carries Ultramarines Tactical Marines?
Mm-hmm.
A Cabal of the Skewered Eyeball, whatever, can carry Witch Cult of the Stabby Stabs. Like it's you just carry Drukhari.
Yeah.
All their transports carry Drukhari. So you can take Venoms,
buff
make them this homunculus thing. You can stick Flayed Skull guys inside, and then they reroll 1s and ignore cover because of their trait. Or you can put Blackheart guys inside, or put Witches inside, or Incubi or Drazar.
Mm-hmm.
And you could just take... You could take a really weird detachment where you don't actually take anything Covens. You take a homunculus, and then you take some Talos, but then you take Scourges or Incubi or all of these weird little units that don't have a trait that Dark Eldar have. They don't violate the traits, you know, like Scions, they don't take it away from you. But then you take a dedicated transport for all of those, so you end up with 6, 7, 8 of these Coven Venoms, which will end up toughness 6 if you deploy them near the homunculus. That mitigates the Alpha Strike. Their damage output is by far superior to what it was before.
Mm-hmm.
You can do some really cool things here.
Yeah, and you can, if you bring 2 homunculus, because they're transports, you can deploy next to it, and then embark, move forward, and then disembark the other one, and you can cycle them, so you can kind of keep that toughness buff and have kind of
a school of Venom. That's a fun visual.
It really is. But like, there's so many stacking buffs you can get into where you can have a very mobile castle that is... for Dark Eldar, starting to look at being a little bit durable and a little more offensive-minded. And a list that was already performing decently well has gotten a lot better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there are some other traits here. You can get a +1 to charge, which is kind of cool for charging out a deep strike. That maybe goes into Grotesques because you can risk an 8-inch charge, but they don't have all the buffs of Craft World, so I don't like it as much. You can make it so that a 6 against a not vehicle... a 6 to hit automatically wounds. You don't have to make a wound roll. I'd rather just be +1 to wound and have it apply to all the hits.
Mm-hmm. What's the Torturer's Craft stratagem?
I believe that's one where you reroll the wound with a unit in melee, which is actually one that I used a lot with my Grotesque list. It's awesome. Yeah. And I kind of like that, you know, what they're building in here, where all of these traits have the option to take a trait, make one stratagem cost less.
So it feels like it's a trait stratagem.
So it kind of makes it feel like you have a Craft World or Coven specific stratagem because it's more accessible.
Yeah.
And then, you know what? Obsessive Collectors is cool. Every time you kill a model in melee with a unit, you regain up to D3 lost wounds in that unit. And if the unit is racked, which are a single wound unit, then you can instead return D3 destroyed models. So this sounds cool, but you're really, in the multi-model units, you're only healing up one model if they're multi-wounds, like Talos. You would go in there and mulch, you know, a ton of orcs, because every model you kill gives you the D3 wounds back or the D3 guys back. But it's up to the original unit size. So, 3 Talos go in, you can easily kill some stuff, get 1 Talos up to full health. Awesome. Or you can use Grotesques, get 1 Grotesque up to full health. Racks, you can get them up to full strength, but it's a 10-man unit, and if you've taken significant casualties, you might only be killing 2 or 3 guys. So you could send a 4-man rack squad into Orc Boys, kill 3 orcs, get 3d3 models back, go up to 10. This is very cool. I just don't know if it plays to the strengths of the armies, because you're never taking full-size rack units.
Yeah, it's kind of...
But it's cool.
It's kind of tricky. Like, it would be neat for, like, finishing off, like, guard units and little things. Like, if you've been taking smart missile fire or something that doesn't kill the unit quickly, but it's too situational for me.
I would actually say that I would take it if I was just doing Talos no Venoms, because Talos don't really have poison weapons, so they don't benefit from the experimental creations.
Right.
But if you take the +1 to wounded damage and shooting, you do need a second trait at that point. You can take this and just wounded Talos goes into combat, kills 5 Space Marines, goes all the way up to full health. Great. That's not bad.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's got some play. I don't think it'll be the main one seen, but I'm also not going to be shocked when I see it.
Yeah.
So, I think that wraps up the Coven stuff.
Yeah.
Again, I'm sure you see what I mean. Coven feel like the big winners here.
Absolutely.
We do have Ynnari. The Ynnari rules are all the same as the May White Dwarf that killed them. I say killed. I've seen people do well with them, but made them less popular. The only thing of note is that the points costs changed. All 3 characters got cheaper. The one that matters the most is the Incarn. The Incarn went down 57 points. I'm not sure if that makes him worth him, her, it. It's really hard to tell with Ynnari. If it makes it worth using, but cheaper helps. The FAQ stopped you from heroically intervening after you teleport. That is a big deal, but you still have a teleporting Demon Prince for cheaper. It's better damage. It's better than a Demon Prince in every way, other than its initial speed, but it costs more. I don't love it, but again, it's an HQ choice you can plug into any detachment, because you can plug in our characters into Eldar detachments without ruining their traits if you decide that they're not going to be a Ynnari detachment. It's not bad. You'll see it more because it's cheaper, and it rewards high skill play. Again, your Sean Nadens, Daniel Olavas, you will see this model. I just don't think it's going to be in every list because it's still going to take a little bit of skill and precision to use.
Yeah.
But cheaper helps it out.
It's one of those where it is over 10% of your army, and it's hard to get it to contribute every game.
And it's easy to lose. It's only an 8-wound model. It's got an invul, it's got a feel no pain, but it's only an 8-wound toughness 6 model. A Smash Captain could easily, you got a little close, Smash Captain goes instead.
Yeah.
It doesn't take much for that to go wrong. So, not much to say on Ynnari, other than, hey, they got a little points buff, it's better, it helps. And I've seen people get some play with them, but this isn't a Ynnari review because we've already seen these rules.
Yep. Did
you have anything else, Daniel?
No, I think we're good. We've actually gone over an hour, and we want to talk about a little bit SoCal.
Let's make it fast then.
Okay.
By the time this is coming out, it'll probably be Friday or Saturday, and I'll be on my way to San Diego. I am going to SoCal. I adjusted my list very slightly from where it was for Crucible. Basically, I dropped 2 Venerable Dreadnoughts and a Tech Marine and a Chaplain on Jump Pack, and I replaced it with a Chaplain Dreadnought with Las Cannons, a Chaplain on Bike, another Thunderfire, and I mixed some Hurricane Bolters into my Centurions. Yeah. I think I talked about these changes last week. Yeah, I don't have that much to say. I still have 6 Ballistic Skill 2 untargetable las cannons, which is great. Whereas before I had 8, but in exchange I get another Thunderfire. It's going to let me play a little more cagey. I don't have to hide 3 Dreadnoughts, I only have to hide 2 now.
Yep.
Chaplain on Bike's nice, and getting 5 Hurricane Bolters on Centurions is 60 Bolter shots. I don't mind these changes without the FAQ. With the FAQ, it became very necessary and kind of an auto-take.
Yeah, and I personally just think there's more games where the additional Thunderfire cannon is going to contribute than the additional 2 las cannons.
Yeah, and I'll miss the auto cannons. But
yeah,
still, I've got good options here.
And honestly, I'm a huge proponent of just 3 Thunderfire cannons. I still want you to get a 3rd in that list.
I would love to,
but I don't know how it fits.
Well, I'm filling all 6 heavy support slots into my Spearhead right now because I've got 3 Eliminator Squads of the Mortis and 2 Thunderfires. I could take a White Scar one, but if I'm not getting the Master Artisans, it's just I feel bad at that point, and it just makes me not want to take it. So
I understand.
Then,
but I'm hooked on them. Like that was when I wrote my new list. I started out with 3 Thunderfire cannons.
I don't.
And then I'll figure out the rest.
They are very powerful. So, you also have a tournament this week. It's almost as prestigious as the SoCal Open. What is it? 250 players versus 8 to 12.
Yeah,
something like
it's
that.
About the same.
Okay.
Yeah, I have won more GTs this season than RTTs, and I'm trying to change that.
Well, when the big fish are away.
Exactly. Yeah, and Siegler won't be there, so we'll be good.
Hey, neither will I.
That was the joke.
So,
I was not accepting you as a big fish there.
Okay, buddy.
Yeah.
So what are you running?
So it's going to be 3 Stormhawk Interceptors, 3 Thunderfire Cannons, 3 units of Eliminators, a Repulsor, 3 characters, 2 Scouts. I broke the rule of 3. I only did 2 Scouts and one Intercessor squad. But yeah, it's basically 3, 3, 3, 3, 2, 1.
Okay. So it's a lot of indirect fire. The 3 flyers buzzing around, making people think. The 1 Repulsor, I'm sure the Ironstone will be next to it.
Yep, it'll be Ironstone.
And this is pure Iron Hands, right? Not a successor?
Yep. Pharos, Captain on Bike. He's fun. I like him. I could save points and not have him on a bike because I don't have an aura to maintain anymore. I just got to keep up with the Repulsor.
Mm-hmm.
So I could shave points there, give him a jump pack.
But the model's pretty cool. I like the model he built because he's painted the size of the Emperor and he's holding a scythe.
Yeah,
I like it.
And he's got a super ornate storm shield.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, that's why he's staying exactly how he is. Like
I like it.
I could do other stuff, but it's not that big of a difference in a cheesy army.
We'll see how Iron Hands adjust post FAQ. I think they're perfectly viable, but hopefully we can come back with 9 wins between us.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see how it goes.
So, and that's just one little thing. I actually prefer this list over the triple repulsor list. Mm-hmm. I can't say that. If the Ironstone still affected everything, obviously triple repulsor, but no. Let me rephrase that.
Too.
If the invulnerable save applied to vehicles, then I would probably have stayed with the repulsor list. If that one stayed and Ironstone went away. Mm-hmm. But losing both, definitely, I like this list better.
But one, you can size steel armor, get it in cover. You can make it pretty tight.
Oh, I'm still, and that's why I'm the 1 repulsor, because I can essentially make it where you need, AP5, AP6 for it to push me past a 5-up.
If you want to be super sneaky, you can take the Tome of Macarius on your librarian to get the extra power. Cast a Might of Heroes on the repulsor and make it toughness 9.
I can do that.
I don't know if that's worth doing, but you might see a game where it is.
What strength 8 weapon?
Crimson Hunter Exarchs.
Okay.
Battle
and the
cannons.
Eldar matchup.
Battle cannons, if you're seeing guard.
Yeah.
If you're seeing guard and they've got that damage 3, big chunky, you're going to take that.
Yeah, that's true.
That's pretty good.
Okay. So there's a little bit of play there, but yeah, I like that this list has more layers to it instead of just, here's my castle, if you don't break it, you lose.
Yeah, this does have layers.
Yeah, this has a lot more layers, has more secondary options I can score, without really giving up too many more than the other one did. So
yeah, I like it. I think it'll be fun.
Yeah. And you can't,
was there a Mortis Dread in this too, or is that?
Yes, that was. So I was about to say, you can't max Headhunter unless I make my Mortis Dread a character, which
You're going to do it every time.
Unless it's Chaos.
Quad Las. As it should be.
Yep. Quad Las to... So I made up the firepower, and I know I'm running on, but I like this list. So Triple Repulsor has obviously the most firepower you can imagine in a list.
Pretty much.
So I replaced basically the 2 main guns on my 2 Executioners I lost with 4 las cannons, and I replaced all the heavy bolter equivalent with 3 Stormhawks.
Yeah, so you still put out similar firepower.
I have similar firepower. That's why I kept Pharos, because I have the Mortis and the Repulsor, so I can get both of them to Blitzkill 2, rerolling.
Yeah, you lose some durability, but you've got more shenanigans because you got 9 Eliminators.
And I added the Eliminators, which I didn't have before, so...
I think it'll be fun.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, and in a week, we'll be telling y'all all about my massive, awesome event and your tiny little one.
And I'll be complaining about what inevitably beats me. I'm sure it'll be broken, OP, and bad luck on my part.
Absolutely.
Nothing but. Alright, I think that just about wraps us up for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. Feel free to do the normal things that YouTubers say. Like, comment, subscribe.
Yep.
One of those.
And
share us.
Yeah. I like the sharing.
Share us.
And comments are fun. I like reading
comments. Comment more. We want to talk to you guys.
Yeah.
It's not true, but we'll do it anyway.
Yeah. And
what are we on right now? We're on YouTube, iTunes, Podbean, Spotify.
I found us on Spotify.
Okay.
it's just, for some reason, getting onto all these podcast servers, it just doesn't really like to cooperate.
Never
But
does.
I actually found us on Spotify, and I think that's my favorite place to listen, because it's easy to save, it's easy to see. You can get the updates if you follow us or not. I didn't actually click anything to follow it, but it was just on my recently played, so I can see it, and
well, go follow us.
I might.
Good. All right, well, check us out on YouTube and iTunes for sure, and Spotify.
Yep.
And I think that wraps us up. Next week we'll be recapping tournaments and maybe talk a little bit about the future, which will include new Space Marine supplements, because we haven't heard enough of those.
Absolutely, and if we're lucky, we'll have Jimmy back and we'll talk some Tyranids.
Yeah, talk some Tyranids next episode.
All right, see you guys.
Bye-bye.